Are we live?
You are. Go.
Welcome to the Mystery of Mysteries. I'm Lisa. I've been editing a whole lot of horror games, which all tend to have mysteries that, um, when you solve them, maybe you wish you hadn't.
I'm Josh. I'm mostly here to do tech. That's not entirely
That's
true.
not true.
I am so when Lisa writes things, I'm often her co-writer. And I have been playing in mystery games and doing theory for I don't know, over 20.
I'm Darren Watts. I'm a role-playing game writer and designer. I'm probably best known for being the former owner of Hero Games and Indie Press Revolution. I got out of the owning things business about 10 years ago and have been freelancing for a wide range of companies. And I work in a lot of genres, most of which have some sort of mystery element to them. So,
And I'm Kenneth Hite. I'm a tabletop role-playing game designer. I have been working a great deal in the Gumshoe Vineyard for the Gumshoe engine, a gaming engine designed to optimize the telling of mysteries at the table. So to that end, I've written Trail of Cthulhu, Knights Black Agents, Fall of Delta Green, and probably the purest mystery game that I've done is that I co-authored and co-designed Bubble Gumshoe with the amazing Emily Caraboss and the almost as amazing Lisa Steele. So that is the most straightforwardly your job is to solve a mystery game that I've done, but Gumshoe is all about finding the mystery in other genres, and that is what I've done in horror, spy thrillers, and psychological disintegration, as happens in
as
any
a
game that was
subgenre,
originally designed by Greg Stolze.
right?
That's what it becomes. It's what it's about.
And we forgot to do that. So yeah,
Huh?
I'm he him,
Oh, she, her.
but Um,
Isn't it on the tag somewhere?
I think it's on our
Whatever.
tags there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Should be on
it's
tag.
it is. It's not on ours, even though I renamed us. It would be a long name.
right.
Oh, okay. So now that we have the mystery of pronouns solved, what is not a
At least you're gonna have to speak up again.
what is a mystery and what is not a mystery? Was that audible?
Yep.
That was audible.
Can you give me some narrow the question down a little bit? I think.
So, for example, if I'm watching Leverage, I'm watching a heist show. There's no mystery there, is there? I get a lot of the same.
What is it that makes a show a mystery? Or
Yeah.
it makes story a mystery rather than some other genre, some other.
Or if you want to
some other
start from
story.
literary roots, E.M. Forster said, if you say the king died and then the queen died, and nobody knew why the queen died until we discovered that the queen died of grief, that is the first mystery. I'm not sure I agree with him, but if you want a starting point, that's as good as any.
I think a mystery is any story in which, regardless of the audience, whether a character is in fact actually attempting to uncover some previously unknown information that is, vital to their well-being in whatever form, right? Even if it's a simple procedural and it's their job to actually resolve it. It's not necessarily a requirement for the reader or the viewer to not have that information. Obviously, like Columbo, well established is a mystery, which from the beginning you absolutely know who did it. But there is still a great deal more that needs to be, like told about that, and we enjoy the process of watching the protagonist, kind of like work that problem out. So it's got to be something for where somebody in the story is missing a fundamental piece of information, and the process that they go through to gather it.
Yeah, and these are sort of answering the question structurally, what is a mystery? Obviously, by genre, a mystery is anything with the word mystery on the side sold in the mystery section of the bookstore.
Right.
Um,
There.
Yeah.
So, and when we're talking about mystery gaming, I think that one of the things that Robin did with Gumshoe, Robin Laws, the designer of Gumshoe, my Canadian life partner, um, is to recognize that virtually every procedural is a structural mystery, regardless of the theoretical genre. So, for example, Star Trek is almost always a mystery show, in that you come to some planet, they're screwing things up somehow, and you have to A, figure out why they're screwing things up, and B, how do you unscrew things up? It's a problem to be solved. It is a procedural in that way, but it is not in any way what anyone watching or even writing the show is considering a mystery, even if Data is dressed up as Sherlock Holmes for some dumb reason. Um, so the structure of Star Trek is a mystery structure, and that is uh, where, as Darren says, the question is, do the protagonists, usually the same as the players, uh, seek to find information in order to complete the narrative satisfactorily? And if they do, then it's structurally a mystery, no matter what it's theoretically about. And that might be,
And no matter what
you
the
know,
trappings are.
right. And that might
Yeah.
even be, you could imagine that a purely tactical challenge then can become presented as a mystery. So every D&D game is a mystery if it's anything more complex than, a monster you've already fought in a featureless 10 by 10 room. Once you have to start intelligently solving problems, tactical or otherwise, you're on the road to mystery. And the question is, to what extent do the mechanics in a game privilege that? And to what extent do the mechanics not care, either offloading it onto the players or assuming system wise that you've already done the optimal thing and all that's left is to find out if you stabbed the guy? So you can say that, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, an encounter might structurally be a mystery, even if the solving has already been done by the fact that you're a 5th level fighter, and therefore it's irrelevant what tactic you take against these orcs.
So I think this points out one thing that I wanted to bring up, which is that when we talk about mixed, we're basically firing right hook, and we're hitting a bunch of, and that's fine because that's true for any kind of genre definition. And so one of the things you're looking at when you're a mystery fan coming, what are you looking to experience? What are you looking to read? As opposed to when we look from analysis and say, we've designed a mystery system. What kind of good for? What kinds of things we hit? Those are two different circles, and they overlap. Reasonable point, but they're not the same thing because we're looking at things that are shaped like a mystery versus things that look like a mystery to the reader, even if they're not a mystery at all.
So, like, for example, if you're playing a game using Dogs in the Vineyard or the rules, it is explicitly stated this isn't a mystery. People will tell you what is going on. Your job is to solve the problem, but solve the problem can also be a mystery.
And I will note that's actually a really good example because some mysteries unfold. Some mysteries do not include the basic mechanic of mysteries where you're finding clues and the clues are presenting themselves one at a time, partially due to what you're doing, and then you're putting them together. That's not necessarily happening in, say, Star Trek or Dogs in the Vineyard. In those, it still feels like a mystery because the information is the primary current.
Right. The pursuit of incomplete information, or the pursuit of
Yeah.
information that you have part of and want to get to a
solving
narrative
is the
completeness.
element, figuring out how to put things together. But you're not going through necessarily, in Star Trek or a lot of things that are shaped like that. You're not going through the work of finding those clues. It's just they're dropping one at a time and things are happening. And then eventually at some point you're going, okay, we have a whole bunch of information. What do we do now?
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've played with players who love solving things, and I've played with players who are happy if it unfolds, if at timed intervals they get more information and don't have to read my mind.
I mean, Ken just told me, without actually saying so, 5 minutes ago, that Everway, a classic fantasy game, is a mystery game, which I guess in a way it kind of is. Since every way is
Well, again, I wouldn't call that a mystery game because when you like add the word to the front of the game, then you are implying considerably more trappings
correct.
of a traditional mystery story, as Ken says, of the sort of thing that is
So,
found in the mystery section of the bookshop.
Yep.
what do we
But
expect when we see a game that bills itself as a mystery game?
right. In that case, I think then
What
you
do
are
we expect?
expecting to have a situation where, like clues are revealed, with some sort of kind of procedural methodology for finding them and for, investigating them.
And even more specifically, dealing with either a crime or a social solecism that is
Right.
being committed and must be uncovered at least and solved in the ideal circumstance.
Exactly. Right. The mystery of, like what happened to my father is a very different thing, than the mystery of like who killed my father, right? Or something like that. So
Right. And the
in
and
in
I'd
both
point out
cases I have, sorry.
I'd point out real fast that the action of finding clues is almost never central to a good mystery. At no point we get like a line where Sherlock Holmes crawls around on the carpet, but he puts together the clues that he has, and that's the action of the mystery.
Hmm.
Similarly, in Gumshoe, you don't have to crawl around on the carpet. You can be assumed, you can say, I'm crawling around on the carpet, but the clues are given to you because that's literally the point of the exercise. And so the question of do I have to roll to spot the clue is not actually the question you're asking about a mystery game. The question is it structurally about finding this information? And with the word mystery in front of game, as Darren says, is this relevant to solving a crime or resolving some a wound in the way things ought to be? So that includes tracking down deep ones or any of the sort of Call of Cthulhu games. Those are all, as Sandy Peterson said in frickin' 1981, those are occult mysteries, and that's what
Right.
Cthulhu stories are.
Right. Are clues a key, kind of like portion of a mechanic of, or like the manner in which story is, kind of like doled out to the players,
Right.
and making them work to receive that story, making them have to go through the process of, like botching a roll or something like that is usually inappropriate, and very difficult, I think, to make fun. Um, as Ken pointed out, or Robin pointed out, I think originally in Gumshoe, like the most dreaded portion of a Call of Cthulhu game was the botched library use roll,
Yep.
right? Like that made no sense. There wasn't any other way to get like the next key piece of information that generated story. So
And the worst part
why
is,
is that mechanized at all, right?
and then
That's
the worst part is, you can say it makes simulationist sense. Obviously, there are days that I can't find things in my own library, much less some haunted house library.
exactly.
But that
I can't find my keys this
renders
morning. Right. Yeah.
the narrative nugatory, and that's the problem, because games are not physics models in which we sort of play pachinko and see where the little balls go. Games are about or let's say not are often, and certainly in most cases are expected to be about telling a compelling, interesting story together. And so if your devotion to actually modeling the fact that the Washington, D.C. Police Department has a 10% clearance rate on murders means that 9/10 of your Washington, D.C. crime game have to end in, I don't know,
Is that a
that's
problem?
that's unsatisfying play unless the play is actually not a mystery game, it's an emotional wounding game.
Right.
And your constant failure to do your job and protect the city is sort of the actual exercise, the actual agon that happens in game.
At the store that your narrative is wrestling with. Right.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
established, I think, that none of us like that particular style of simulation. Really good reason. That said, I would say that mysteries certainly fall into whodunits, where the audience is expected to figure out all the clues, figure out the mystery, or have a
Hmm.
and thriller more style stories. Terminology may be off, where the audience might figure it out. In fact, we often do via meta, but they're not necessarily even given all the clues to actually figure it out the normal way. And instead, it's more of an unfolding where the audience is enjoying the ride and maybe looking at emotional, but they're not sitting there along with the text going, okay, there's this clue and this clue, therefore it can't be.
Well,
And
but
figuring it out. Is that modeled in role-playing games in any way?
there's no version of a role playing game, or there's no version of a successful role playing game where the audience is just enjoying the ride. Right. I suppose unless you're doing some sort of like actual play thing where you're actually doing this for the entertainment of a separate audience from the players. But I presume that we are ordinarily talking about a game in which, like a traditional role playing game, a group around a table where the audience is the protagonists, right? The
Well,
audience and the
exactly.
protagonist are the same. Are the same thing, and so the division between those, or any necessary division between those, is kind of like the interesting question of a role-playing game, right? The extent to which your players are the audience as opposed to the players are the drivers of the narrative in the first place. And I think that question tells you, or the answer to that question tells you, the style of game that you're going to run. And I think, most of us who have played for a long time vastly prefer not to be the audience at the table, right? Like we prefer
Yeah.
to be the generators of story.
And by and large, when the players are the audience, and that is a sign of substandard, I think, by now, GMing.
Right.
Because you're sitting around waiting for the GM to tell you who did it, as opposed to taking on some active role in the story. And again, if that's the point, right? If that's what's needed to happen, just open on it. Say the GM turns to the players and says, as brilliant detectives or clerics or whatever the hell you are, you know that the Baron was murdered by his wife. Now deal with that. I mean,
Right.
why would you waste an hour of gameplay ginking around if the players are not expected to take a role in figuring out who murdered the Baron?
Well, that's
So,
actually a question that I've got. If you've got the idea that, okay, you found the clues, but theoretically, you now have to put them together, is failure a valid option? Is it valid then for the players to not figure out the Baron's wife killed him?
sure,
Yeah.
because
Especially in a game where they're self-directed, where the story is generated out of that. Absolutely, failing to figure that out. I mean, in the long
it's like
run,
saying, is a dungeon crawl invalid if you get beat up by giants and have to flee?
right? Right. Ideally, hopefully, you'll come back to it. I mean, like, I
Yeah.
don't think anybody will be satisfied playing a mystery game in which literally the players never figure out what happened.
Right.
That would be a particularly difficult. But there's certainly no reason that at any given point in the story they should figure out what happened.
And
Right.
certainly,
There are many opportunities to fail along the way.
in many great Call of Cthulhu sessions and other Cthulhu-y games, never actually figuring out what happened is part of the charge and is
Sure.
part of the
Right.
fun.
Right.
And so, if you've gone into the haunted house where geometry is wrong and you've survived all these challenges and figured out, maybe, what was it, built by an architect who was messed up on space meat? Is that what's going on? But you never figure it out, and then you blow up the house or escape it or whatever happens. The experience is the point, right?
Right.
That your character has either, on the absolute base level, met a bunch of tactical challenges and escaped with a full clutch of hit points and sanity, or that your player has undergone some degree of emotional trauma and changed as a human being because now they have a desperate fear of cold or whatever it is that's happened as a result of their time in that evil mystery house. And you can certainly easily imagine, and I would suspect that Robin would say he's already designed games of existential mystery in
Sure.
which the experience of the mystery without knowing the solution is again the core activity of play, and that the thing that you're doing is either setting out meta narratives for the meta player to figure out, or you are just establishing the fun of that kind of challenge in the same exact way that a dungeon crawl establishes the fun of a tactical challenge. And
Yeah.
it's
At that point, I think you're just kind of like subdividing. You're defining what kind of game that you're playing, right? Like, and the experience that you expect to have. There are, Trail of Cthulhu is a fabulous example of a game in which it is possible to improvise a mystery, right? Like where,
Oh, yeah.
the set of clues is presented and the GM does not actually know what happened. And is only interested in kind of like providing a situation where the players in play themselves kind of like come to a solution that will in the end turn out to be the solution, right?
And
They
then
may
what's
have
the
steps
Benjamin
along the
Baugh
way.
game? Is it Dark Secrets of Candlewick Manor, something like
Mhm.
that?
Candlewick with all the
Exactly. Yep.
That is
cages. Yeah.
Sure.
an explicitly players build the solution together, and the
Right.
GM is, their little hands are slapped if they act to know what's happening.
Right.
And so you have that activity as still fundamentally from the outside, from some imaginary observer, it looks just like the most clue dripping, yes, we know who killed the Baron, you're gonna find it out game, because structurally the characters go through the exact same situation. It's just that the players are doing different things.
Right.
Um,
And so there's
Similarly,
a
yep.
sorry.
Okay.
In Apocalypse Keys, the PCs will get a bunch of clues, and then they'll come up with some hypothesis for what they think is going on, and then they'll roll. And if they roll high, they'll find out they're right. And if they
Right.
roll wrong, they'll come up with some way in which they're wrong, and they'll keep going, and eventually they'll come up with another hypothesis until they
But
find out
once
one's
again,
right.
as you have to separate the player and the character in that
Yeah.
Oh yes.
situation, right? Like the player should know or should at least have a strong idea of what kind of game that they are playing
Yes.
when they
Yes.
sit down to play it, right? Like if I sat down, to like play a game with a GM where I know that the game is going to be the sort of thing where players are themselves kind of like generating in play the solution to the mystery, that's a different experience for me as a player than if I'm playing a superhero game and I know that the GM knows who murdered the mayor, but I as Batman have to figure it out, right? Like
Yeah.
that's these are two entirely different experiences that can both kind of like easily fit under the perhaps overlarge umbrella of what is a mystery game.
Yeah, for me, this is what ties back to the whodunit discussion distinction I came up earlier,
Hmm.
where if I'm playing it as a whodunit, I want there to be a solution that I'm reaching. Whereas if
Right.
I'm playing creator, I don't need there to be a solution. I can have it unfold and I'll be part of that process, coming up with ideas without knowing that there isn't one solution that I have to try to figure out.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you drew a misleading distinction then, because you can play a improvised or emergent mystery that is exactly a classic golden age, dead body in the library who done it.
Right.
And you can play a weirdo retro 70s existential screwing around mystery uh as a absolute, oh, you have the clues, you figured it out, it's aliens, or it's the past,
Right.
or it's
Exactly.
your Jungian anima that did it. And
Right. Exactly. Clues tell you that the narrator did it. Yes.
yes,
Exactly.
and so
Right.
the form factor you were drawing is, it's fine for books, although if this were the Bookatopia, I'd have many pushbacks on that. But in gaming, it's a misleading distinction to make, and to assume that games have any relationship to some imagined genre that they need to take place in is, I think, putting the cart before the horse. I mean,
Right.
some of them do, right? Obviously, Bubble Gumshoe is straight up, it's a mystery. You get clues, you solve it. It's very classical in that respect. The sort of the twist comes from the fact that often you're teens solving things that aren't considered crimes, but are still considered mysteries. But to say, especially at a festival of indie gaming, that whodunits only work one way, I think is
Um,
needlessly reductive.
since I was called out there, I will clarify that. So what I'm thinking of is you've got a bunch of pieces that are a puzzle, and the idea is that you're putting them together, and that there's a way that the pieces together. As opposed to you have a bunch of pieces that with a lot of space between them, and you're putting them, and then there's a way to put them together, and then you try to figure, and then but there are multiple ways that they could go together.
So the difference you're drawing was not at all what you said it was. It's the difference between a predetermined solution and a not predetermined solution.
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, we agree that is a difference, and we've talked about it.
A large one, right? And it's a methodology question as well, right? I mean, there's a predetermined solution to Clue too, but that doesn't make it, as a board game, but that doesn't make it, like you're not solving it based on your deep understandings of like, the
Miss Scarlet.
the motives of Miss Scarlet for killing Mr. Body, right? Like that's not really a concern. We're just trying to figure out,
Right. But one of the challenges when you have a mystery where it's not predetermined, especially if it's GM'd as opposed to a GM-less thing where from the start everyone's collaborating, is how do you give the players enough to move forward so that you find a solution as a group and you don't just sort of leave them hanging with we've got all these clues and they could fit together anyway, and without some path forward that feels right, it's dissatisfying to know they could fit together anyway.
Well, that again, I mean, this is like, how do I enjoy blueberry pie if I don't like blueberries?
No.
I mean, you've literally just said if this model is
blueberries
dissatisfying, well, my advice is don't do that, like the Henny Ugman says. No,
it's
I mean, in theory, if the players are stuck, the GM feeds them more information. If they're excited, the GM sits back and lets them solve it. That's how you do that.
right.
And if the players have some existential trauma because you didn't have written down the Baron's wife killed him, then those players should not be playing improvisational mysteries. They should be playing the other kind.
Yeah.
Right, like I said, as long as there's an awareness, like when you sit down, I want to know which of I can enjoy both of these games equally, and have for many years.
Player, Darren, as
but the point is, like, I do want, when I sit down, I want to know which of them I'm doing, right? Like there is a, that's my methodology as a player is going to change based on which of those that I'm participating in,
and
right?
that's absolutely true, because you, instead of playing to solve a tactical challenge or a intellectual challenge, you're playing experientially, and I think maybe that does get finally back around to Joshua's original dichotomy. Is what does it feel like in play as opposed to what is the actual structure of
exactly. Am I solving a puzzle as the player? Am I solving the mystery, or am I playing a character who is themselves solving a mystery based
while
on
collaborating to tell an exciting crime story or whatever, or Batman story?
Exactly.
Or if we're using something that's GM-less and we've already decided what the solution is, are we focusing in on it as a mystery? Are we focusing on the feels we get because of the crime that was committed and who we realized did it?
Sure. Well, once again, that's at that point you are only defining what kind of game that you're playing, right? Like what the
Yeah.
And again, there's structurally there is very little difference in the end between Columbo and another kind of like CBS murder mystery, except for that one change of at the beginning we all see who did it, right? Like beyond that, they are structurally telling the same kind of story and the same kind of experience, but the audience interaction with it and the what would be the part of the player that is serving as the audience, their reaction is coming at it from a different direction, and that's why Columbo is awesome and many other mysteries are not. So
Columbo is awesome.
This is known.
And how forward we put the mystery is always an interesting question as well. Red Harvest is this lovely mystery gem where there's a mystery at the beginning and a mystery at the end. Beginning stuff is happening that doesn't have anything to do with the mystery at all, except the mystery is the reason it's able to happen. And which is a thing we can do in our games, is that maybe the players aren't that interested. They're mostly interested in interacting with characters doing.
Well, I would be disappointed if I sat down to play a game where I thought I was the player, like I'm trying to solve this puzzle as a player for this, and to discover that the GM was in fact making it up all the time without having like informed me, right? Like that, that's that
or
I think
that the real solution was the friends you met along the way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. right? Like,
But
because I would have felt like I wasted a great deal of mental energy on a problem that like was never there to be worked on, right? That just feels
Yeah.
like
Oh, yes.
there must have been something
Oh,
better I
yes.
could have done with my afternoon. So it's a key question, right? Like that can't be like avoided or elided, and it certainly can't be deceitful, right? Like the GM can't cover up whether or not they had an answer or shouldn't do that because
Certainly that is absolutely, yes, you're right, Darren. That is a fine moral statement, and I completely condemn the behavior I'm about to describe that I've done a million times. Which is, I go in, I have a great idea for the mystery. I know that the Baron's wife murdered him. I'm set up, I've got all the clues, they're scattered around, the players are gumshoeing around, getting them clues easily, and because they are players, and therefore inherently flawed beings, they come up with some entirely wrong solution. And they say, well, the butler obviously did it because he was jealous that the Lord was a Freemason and he hates the Freemasons. And we figured this out for reasons because we're players. And or they've grabbed on some piece of string that you accidentally littered the scenery with.
Mhm.
And now they've got a beautiful airtight frame on the butler, unless there is a sequel in your head where you have to break the wife out of prison. The answer is, God, you guys are so smart.
yes,
That butler is
that's
going to do hard time at Dannemora for
of
that
course
murder.
that's
He
different from
absolutely
what I was
committed.
referring to, but yes,
Right.
absolutely. I don't mind if the GM changed
different.
his mind about or her mind about who did it partway
Yeah.
through because we were telling a better story than they had in mind. God knows that happens to me as a GM all the time. I don't
Yeah.
have but
And I know you
that
knew
I
that.
think is a different thing. Yeah,
The thing is that we're doing this for other people who might not have known that.
who
So
are not as who are not as lovely as us.
elderly and experienced as we are, who do not between them have a long human lifetime of role-playing game running.
Right.
Yeah, I still remember at one point Lisa and I were playing
That I was wondering if you were wondering.
Professor Challenger gameplay run by Marcus Rowland.
That.
Oh, really? Where we were being kids solving a mystery of the Loch Ness
It was the
Monster.
pterodactyl that did it.
And we came up, we did something, and the GM looked at it. It didn't actually tell us this at the time. He told us afterward, and went, "Okay, the answer I thought was wrong."
Right.
I was going to have the
I'm not
mob
going-
with pitchforks and torches come out, but nope. You decided you were going to befriend the Loch Ness Monster. You befriended the Loch Ness
Of
Monster.
cour's, but that's once again that's
got nothing to do with whether or not the Loch Ness Monster was the murderer, though. I mean, just befriending him, that's just a standard left turn that happens every time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
unrelated to
opposed
mysteries.
to
That's
what
just
I-
hopefully
Yeah.
that's the nature of role playing games, right? Unless
As
you're
opposed to what I think you had more in mind. The other game we were in that I was thinking about was opened with, okay, you're on Mars. You've got a Mars dune buggy that can hold X number of people who's going in it. And after 20 minutes of us trying to figure out how to Tetris this, the GM said, guys, it can make more than one trip. And we're staring at him going, "Here you wasting our time with this.
Oh, I blotted that out.
If it can make one more trip, this is not a mystery. This is not a thing. This is just
Well,
I
I'm
think
glad we've covered the important mystery category of logic puzzles that aren't.
right, exactly.
yeah.
The mystery of the fox and the corn by the side of the river.
The
or
mystery
whatever.
of the crappy GM, a mystery
Right.
that we've all been trying to solve.
Which does bring us back. I think Ken touched on. Obviously, it doesn't have mystery on the title, but how like a D&D encounter might be a mystery. It might not be, but if you're solving a puzzle and you're trying to figure out how do I get through this puzzle, where do these levers go? That's absolutely a mystery.
Sure. Well, like I said, in the end, a mystery is any story with like incomplete information where the acquisition of the rest of the information is key to the narrative satisfaction of the story, right? Like, I mean, that's that's such a broad definition that it's it's more work to find things that don't fit that than it is to find things that do.
And more to
And
the
so
point, it
in the
doesn't
end, I don't think it's not
necessarily
much
help
use.
designer play. So
Exactly right. So that's the the number of things that can be mysteries is nigh infinite, if not
limited only to the number of printing slots Cat Tobin can fill.
So yeah, so that's, I mean, once again, that's different. And if we can, I suppose, continue to wander down that path if we want to, but I mean, that's kind of, to me, less interesting, or less, something that can be solved in a hour-long panel, than to perhaps discuss a like the best ways to manage a mystery that actually looks like a mystery, in its trappings, as well as its kind of like fundamental nature.
Well, how do we manage it beyond the tools we already have, which we have a lot of tools? The danger information equation that a lot of people bring up works. You're looking for
Hmm.
information, you find danger. You're looking for danger, you find information. You're stalling for a minute, I throw danger at you, you'll find information.
Hmm.
Um,
Also
Yes, I
fail
literally
forward.
wrote a game about that.
Right.
yeah,
You
right.
know, you fail to find information, therefore you get, or you fail to put them together the right way. You find danger, just not quite the danger you were thinking of.
I mean, what are the other tools out there? We're just stating the obvious ones, obvious.
The other tools for.
For managing a mystery, you're running a mystery, you've got all the obvious tools that we know about. What are the ones that you've used that you don't see come up that often?
Hmm. There are, as much as I was complaining about GM deception earlier, there are plenty of ways, to kind of to disguise that fundamental exchange that you were talking about, right? Like that, and I don't know that I would use danger so much as I was use, uh, action, right? Like, or
There.
like activity, basically, for it, because it's not necessarily action that is that has to put you at any sort of like peril, right? But as you say, it's like I have to go out and do something, or else we're not telling a narrative story. And then the reward for that is to get information that ideally leads me to my next activity, right? And so, finding new ways to present that exchange, basically, and to even perhaps disguise it as, like that, what seemed to be a color only exchange with an interesting NPC or something, that did in fact actually, can upon reflection by the players be revealed to be like, oh wait, that was in fact actually a piece of information that contributed to the story, right? Like the ability to kind of like disguise those details, so that the players can get to that point of, like the joy of solving the problem, of the sudden realization that, like, oh, it was the, in the kids nursery rhyme all the time, or whatever.
Who said Mambari don't like?
Whereas I might go in a completely different direction. One of the things I am praised for sometimes is making my NPCs relatable. And so if something's stalling, one of the things I'll try to do is make at least one person in the group care about at least one of the NPCs who's involved.
Sure.
Okay, if we don't find the will, this poor widow will be out on the street. I like this widow. We must find the will.
Again, is that related specifically? Well, once again, if the definition of mystery is, like almost any kind of RPG, one would hope that, like, caring about your NPCs, or giving them opinions, once again, should be pretty much standard to any kind of RPG, I would hope. So.
Again, it depends. I've seen things go procedurally where, in the abstract, we're fighting the vampires, we're saving the world, we care about this, but that doesn't mean we're going to chat with the grocer on the corner.
Mhm.
There's caring on the big scale, and then there's caring on the small
Sure.
scale.
Sure.
But again, I think Darren's point that you do that in every role-playing game,
Well, once
Yeah.
again,
Yeah,
it's a
or
good
you,
thing to do in every
yeah, right.
role playing game.
That it's an
Obviously, that we
applicable
we have all
that it's an
played in several
applicable
role
and
playing
valuable
games.
tactic in every role-playing
In
game,
every role playing game,
right?
right? Exactly. So.
Except I guess weird bottle episode ones with no NPCs, but that's a different point. Um, I guess in terms of, I mean, I part of it is that because I've been in the Gumshoe ecosystem so long, I actually don't have a lot of best practices for not Gumshoe mystery solving, because that's literally the problem that Robin solved in 2007. Um, so if I'm trying to think, I did a Unknown Armies campaign fairly recently where every so often the players would fail a information gathering roll, and then they'd be very mad because they're used to Fall of Delta Green where they would have not had to roll, and we'd all curse Greg in jolly fashion and move on. But the solution in play for me, and I don't know that this is necessarily something that is broadly applicable to other GMs, but for me, is just to have a thick enough setting, by which I mean something with enough details and I guess you'd say surfaces if you're talking structure,
Mhm.
that if they don't get it here, they can go to another NPC and try a different
Exactly.
tactic. If they
Right.
can't, if the grocer is mad because they were a jerk to him, then they can go over and break the legs of the heroin dealer until he tells them the same information, so that you have enough of a rich universe that that information can be pried out seemingly naturalistically. And the way to do that is to have built your universe up at the beginning. And this is something that I don't want to say I've been praised for, because I've been criticized for it far more often. Um, is that my settings are ornate and full of stuff, and so therefore, it's not always, there isn't a glowing, video game halo around the one guy you have to talk to, because there's a bunch of guys that you can talk to, and that's to me, part of the fun of running a game is to have all of these different roads that the story can go down and to follow that with the players. And
Right.
this gets
Exactly.
sort of back into just good GMing habits. But if you're talking about ways to distribute information, try having more than one pipe for it to come out of, I guess.
Right.
So one solution I like for that, fail forward, which I think may work better than the multiple pipes, although they can work similarly.
It works.
And you have a more constrained amount of time.
It works
Where
more simply, I think, is the way to
Yeah,
put
it
that. But
definitely
sure.
works simply. Where you put the clues together in the wrong way, or you fail to find things in the library, that leads you down a path that where things look bad and maybe your characters look silly, but you still end up going to the right place. You get the clue by you put the clues together in the wrong place, and you think the mob boss. You go to the mob boss.
I
The
just
mob
I just
boss
find that
is
it's often more difficult to do a believable fail forward from a you didn't see the footprint,
Yep,
Right. Yeah.
true.
right?
Yes,
So many
definitely.
of the fails are not, they're not
Our
graded. It's
absences of action. Exactly.
right,
Right.
and
That there's
Right,
no.
so
and
Right.
if
that's
the
the
if the
biggest
grocer
question.
hates you, fail forward is just either you narrate you beating the grocer up, and he sobbingly gives you the information, spitting his teeth into the cauliflower, or the grocer the grocer's abused wife comes out and says, "Well, if the grocer hates you, you must be all right because I hate that bastard. I'm going to give you the information."
Right.
Again, I don't know that that's, I mean, sure, I guess it's technically failing forward, but since so much of what you're trying to do is binary, do I get it? Do I not get it? A fail forward often is oh, okay, you didn't find the diary. I guess you try spot hidden, and then you try carpentry, and then, oh, please, someone roll. Won't someone roll? I mean,
Right.
it
That's fail
feels like
forward.
that same scrabbling around.
I mean, I agree that a big problem that Fail Forward does not solve is the PCs are looking at a set of clues and they don't know what to do next. And so the players are going, we need more information. We still don't know what to do. As opposed to, but I think Fail Forward, so weirdly, this is something that I know people really, really, but one of the things they did more or less right is that their challenge design was that you would have challenges where you would fail if you failed like 3 rolls. I would say it's a ridiculous mechanic. It actually calls back to Robin Law's Hero War, and therefore it cannot possibly. Um, but but the idea was that when that happened, would then have a built-in or improvise um, uh, box that the PCs would fall through, where they would still get to the final encounter way. So it's not, keep rolling until you you didn't try. I guess you didn't succeed with this roll. Let's try with another die. It's if you fail, you go through door B instead of door A, and maybe there's a goat there. But eventually, when you beat up the goat, you still get to where we wanted to go, in the end, or at least some place that we think.
Yeah, I mean, not finding the diary and then finding an identical diary in a different building seems
Right,
not
exactly.
particularly
Yeah.
sound
Or
to me.
Yeah.
right. And
We've
certainly
got
not for any kind of game that is attempting some sort of like verisimilitude with the real world, right? Like that's
or
just
I would argue particularly enjoyable play. We
right.
got
Yeah.
15 minutes left. Should we be taking questions now?
Yeah. Are there
Yeah.
any questions?
There are indeed.
Oh, thank
Craig
God.
Craig Maloney asks, at what point are clues just a way of pacing the story versus breadcrumbs for leading players to the story?
That depends. Is my gut reaction.
Mm.
Sometimes you can use them as a
I hope that
pacing
helped, Craig.
So one thing I'll note, it's not quite mystery, except it actually totally is. We've run amnesia games.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
And amnesia games allow you to build a structure, and then you leak out information about people's backstory that suddenly gives them motives and information about what's next. And until what the amnesia game does is say until the clue is available, that part of the plot is just happen. And so it ends up being a control mechanism that by controlling the pace of clues, you control the plot.
Sure, I was going to say I think by definition that is part of what clues in any sort of game of incomplete information is, right? Like it's an addition. You would hope, I guess, it's not the only one, right? Like that you have other ways to kind of control the structure and flow of the story. Once again, based more, I think, on the genre of the kind of story that you're telling and the like the feel that you are going for more than the specificity. Good Lord, of the the clues and the rate at which you kind of like spread them through the story.
I mean, I think that pacing is something that is sort of a meta concern, and as Darren sort of implied, clues are one way to pace the story. The other way is the famous Raymond Chandler two guys with a gun bust through the door methodology. I think that so much of any GM's job is just reading the table and finding out, are players frustrated or bored? Are they leaping forward or scratching their heads? And then sometimes the solution is, yeah, add another clue, even if you figure they have the whole, panoply of clues. Maybe they need one more that'll put it all into perspective. Maybe they just need, a brief montage where you, the GM, say, well, you've been drinking coffee and staring at that board for 2 hours, but since you're all gifted homicide detectives, one of you finally notices that only one of your suspects is left-handed, you idiots. And it's about, because the GM's job is all the thankless jobs. It's their job to lift narratives back onto the track if they're stalled out, and
Right.
adding more clues is certainly maybe the one of the most friendly ways to do it, but there's plenty of other ways to pace. So I would say that if you're counting on clues to be your only pacing engine, you're going to wind up with frustrated players faster than if you have other pacing techniques.
Right.
Yeah.
Ready for the next question?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Eric M. Paquette asks, when planning your mystery, what is a good guideline of the number of clues to have ready to present?
I guess there's a school of thought that says everything that they need to know, every fact in the chain should have at least 3 clues pointing to it, because players are ridiculous. I think that's probably a perfectly sound rule of thumb. I mean, as many as it needs is tautological, but I feel like if you are gumshoe or no, if you're vested in the only way to find out that the maid is involved in gun smuggling is to talk to the valet, and they never think to talk to the valet, then you really need to have
Right, that's
gun
on
oil
you.
left around in the linen closet or other things that will give them that vital piece of information. And again, with ideally as many different roads to it. The good thing about mysteries is that it's a genre, and I'm talking about the genre, not the structure, is that it's the genre in which NPCs who suddenly reveal a truth is expected.
Right.
And so either that's because you bullied them or because they decide that they want to, flip on the maid so that you don't find out about the fact that they've been embezzling from the household accounts.
Right.
And you have plenty of motives and tangled nonsense as part of genre. And so you always have more backstop if the players are not spotting 2 of your 3 clues or have spotted 3 of them and gotten all of them wrong. But I would say start out with 3 per absolutely salient fact.
Right,
If you
exactly.
can.
It's the there is always the unusually helpful NPC who happened to see something or whatever that you like wind up finding on uh a detective procedural on TV or something like that, right? Like it's relatively easy, and the genre is forgiving for that kind of like belt and suspenders. Oh, I really expected them to talk to this guy, but as Ken said earlier, there's some other person can provide you effectively the same information if the players have completely missed it. But I agree, it's probably best to for each fact that they're going to need to know to get to the ending, to have 2 or 3 ways to to acquire that in your head to start out with, and it might be that you're going to have to improvise 2 or 3 more as the game goes on.
Narrator's voice. You will need
I
to.
think of it as
You will, right, exactly.
I think of it as one with a lot of with a lot of openness to improvisation, but I think it's basically this. There's an old truism. I think 3 is a magic number. So I think there's an old truism that any problem that you present to players should have at least 3 solutions that you've come up with, and you should, which gives you the flexibility to be open to other solutions that aren't 3. And I think the same is true for the clues.
If you
Where
can't come up with 3 as the GM, if you can't come up with 3 clues to give them, then that's telling you something about the structure of the story that you're
Yeah.
trying to present.
yeah,
That
Right.
the
yeah.
mystery is wrong, not the
At,
players, right? Like at
at,
that point. So
at the
Whereas where
very least, that's a backstop on your creativity.
right.
where I'm starting from, one of the things Gumshoe taught me is a clue is not the package. A clue is the information. If the information is this item is 500 years old, not 50 years old, okay, I can put it in a diary. A witness can know this. There can be a photograph. What I do first with a mystery is, since I'm not usually rolling my own, I read the scenario and I figure out what is the minimum that the players or the characters need to know to get from the beginning to the solution of the mystery.
Right.
That will tell me the minimum number of clues I need when you define clues as information. I would then make sure to package them in at least 3 different ways and to be open to players being players, which I mean in a good way. Sometimes they will think of something I never thought of, in which
Yeah, no,
case
if
we will
players
handle
never
it.
did something wrong, the games would be much more boring.
Right.
I
We
agree.
might as well be writing novels.
Yep.
There is when we were talking about the clue as pacing mechanism, though, this is an interesting like place to actually kind of like add that in, because
Yes.
you can separate the clue from the fact, right? Like it may take in order to solve this mystery, the PCs are going to have to learn X, Y, and Z. Well, to learn X may require more than like just one clue pointing to X. Like there may be 3 clues that each point to a third of X, and they're going to have to put those together. Right. So
Yes.
that becomes a question of like, well, exactly how long do we expect the players to be taking to solve this? Is this a thing that I'm trying to resolve at a convention in a 4-hour slot? Or is this my home game and I've got multiple weeks that the players can work on this, right? The level that you kind of like finally divide the how much information each clue is actually carrying and responsible for is in itself a pacing mechanism, right? So
Are there any other questions?
There are not, but there are many thank yous for your answers so far.
Right.
Okay, then closing remarks. Anyone?
I guess my sort of go-to answer for how to get good at any story is to see how other people do it.
Mhm.
And that might be read mystery scenarios in role-playing games. It might be read the sort of golden age of detection whodunits that are all very, very transparent about this is the ridiculous road you have to go through to get to the dead guy in the library. It might be watch Columbo, which, as Darren has alluded, is the finest mystery show ever made. But the more time you spend in a genre, the better you're going to be and the more comfortable you're going to feel improvising within that genre. If the only mystery you ever heard of was you watched Sherlock once, you're not going to feel confident running Bubble Gumshoe. Whereas if you've been mainlining Nancy Drew since you were a little toddler in a dress,
Right.
then you're going to be you'll be golden running Bubble Gumshoe. And so a lot of it is just get to your comfort level. And worst case scenario, you've read Nancy Drew, which is terrific stuff anyway.
Which is great anyway. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And also, if it is a thing, if it's a new genre to you that you want to kind of like take on, also read some criticism of the genre, of mystery novels, of mystery movies, and that sort of thing, and kind of like get familiar with the actual structure, right? Like, I mean, on the one hand,
Yep.
yes, you can kind of like subconsciously pull it in just by sheer exposure. But if your goal is to like sit down and say, what I want to do is run a game that structurally feels like a mystery, well, read some, there's plenty of material out there to read about the structure and nature of mysteries, right? Even if it's something as simple as Max Collins talking about the rules of an Agatha Christie novel, at least you'll know what the rules of an Agatha Christie novel are when you sit down to tell an Agatha Christie type story. So
to avoid saying the same thing everybody else said, talk to your player, talk to your GM, make sure that you're on the same page as everybody else. What kind of game you're playing? As we discussed here, there are a lot of things that are sitting in this barrel, and you want to make sure that everyone's okay with where you're going to go, rather than one person thinking that they're going to be putting a bunch of clues together, and one person thinking that they're going to be acting freely and coming up with ideas for what the answer could be, and picking something. And as long as you're on the same page, then you're going to have a much better time of it, regardless of your. But
right.
obviously, how much you know about the genre is really important.
Yeah, and related to that, remember, people cannot read your mind. If you're a player and you're going off in a particular direction, let the GM know. Because if I know that the reason you're talking to the grocer is you've got this theory about his wife, that will be a lot more fun for you than if I have no idea why you're talking to the grocer. If you're the GM, remember, the stuff that's obvious to you because you've read the scenario or written the scenario, your players don't know. I
think that's us. So
think that's us. And we put our links in the Discord. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Lisa, for inviting me onto the
thank you,
panel
Lisa,
to make
being
fun
on.
of Joshua. I assume that's what you meant.
Right? Yeah.
If not, you
thank
need
for
to
coming onto the panel. It's
give me a high
always
sign.
fun to be made fun of by you and also to discuss things with you.